Hello and welcome to another video from the Activism, Influencing and Change programme from the London School of Economics and Political Science with me, Tom Kirk. Today we're going to introduce theories of change and why they are useful for helping you to design more intentional influencing strategies. We'll cover their basic building blocks and then we'll look at why they should never be static documents but constantly updated as your own knowledge of the system you're trying to change increases, the tactics that you deploy change that system, and as you get a better understanding of your blockers and enablers to change. So what are theories of change? Theories of change had their genesis amongst those interested in community development and program evaluation, especially in the development and humanitarian sector in the 1990s. It was then embraced by those pushing new public management, the idea that programs, policies, government schemes should be predicated on evidence and should be able to be monitored, evaluated and tested, and that we should learn from our feedback of what works and what doesn't. Theories of change are also often seen as kind of the antidote to linear or reductive approaches to project management, such as the log frame. They try and seek to foreground complexity, to argue or to encourage the testing of assumptions about the systems and the nature of the problems that people want to work upon, and they encourage continuous redrafting based on new information and reflection of what's working and what's not as programs unfold on the ground. Theories of change are really a call to be explicit about what a program or policy or intervention seeks to do and why. And they can take generally two forms. The first is a theory of change narrative, which is a kind of statement of the activities that a program wants to engage in to solve a particular problem, what is known about the context, what is known about particular or assumed about particular cause and effect relationships, and kind of medium, short-term, medium and long-term outputs and outcomes of the program. There's also usually a grand vision of what the world will look like should everything go according to plan in that narrative. Theories of change can also be represented by visualizations. These are diagrams which include the factors mentioned before. They include specifically the inputs or activities that a particular program or initiative is going to engage in, the outputs, the things they will produce, the intended outcomes of those activities and outputs, and then some kind of end goal or impact statement of what the new world will look like. Both ways of representing theories of change must include that theories underlying assumptions or risks. The assumptions are generally about the system, what is known about that system and the relationships, feedback loops and processes within it, and the risks to particular courses of action, activities, outputs and so on and so forth. Here is an example of a theory of change visualization from the Accountability Lab. The theory of change here explains the organization's entire goal and their ways of working. You can see on the top left-hand side their assumptions about the kinds of contexts they work in and the systems that they're dealing with. You can then see their inputs in the blue at the top of the diagram, human capital, financial resources, the relationships and information they bring to bear, and the outputs that they hope they will lead to, campaigns, training, mechanisms, multi-stakeholder initiatives. They then separate the outcomes into intermediate outcomes and long-term outcomes. In the intermediate, you've got the idea that they want to build coalitions, increase knowledge and skills, and develop communities of change. And their long-term outcomes are active and engaged citizens and responsible leaders. In the impact section, they talk around their overall intended impact, which is more inclusive and accountable societies. What's really striking about this diagram is it's very simple, it's very quick and easy to understand, and it can be applied to a range of activities that the Accountability Lab engages in. This second example of a theory of change from Childo combines both a visualization with longer narratives about their theory of change. The organization's overall goal is to impact child well-being. They've represented their theory of change as particular steps. The first step is the inputs that the organisation is going to put in. That includes the activities it's going to be involved in. The second step is the output. They then split their outcomes into intermediate and long term, as their accountability lab did before, and then they finish with their overall impact. Importantly, they've listed the assumptions that need to hold true about the systems and context that they're working in. Their assumptions include things like economic, political, and social environment that's conducive to partners and sustainability. The fact that their partners on the ground will be able to significantly influence children, youth, and families, and that local problems will be addressed by local solutions. So quite a lot of assumptions there in order to ensure their theory of change holds water or can be enacted. When you're setting about designing a theory of change to help you be more intentional about your activism, we suggest there are 7 steps that you should engage in. The first step is to define that problem. This is where you will be looking at the system that you want to change, trying to see it holistically, as we talked about in earlier slides, and that includes also drilling down into the problem with a fishbone and mapping out the stakeholders who may be able to help you create that change, thinking about the power that they hold over the system and how much they agree with your desired goals or smart tasks. The next step is to craft a desired vision or end goal of the kind of impact you want your activism strategy to have, the vision of the good life or a new world that you intend to bring about. The first step is to think about the stepping stones or mini wins that you as an activist or as an organisation or group of activists need to achieve in order to reach that vision. Very rarely is your theory of change going to take the form of if X then Y. There's going to be lots of little mini wins or little goals that you need to achieve or succeed at before your grander vision can be realised. Step 4 is to think about those outputs, which for our activists are the activities and tactics that they'll engage in order to create that change. Here you can also think about your inputs in terms of the relationships, resources, knowledge that you're going to bring to bear. Step 5, and this is the important thing and where theories of change really come into their own, is to think about the conditions and assumptions and risks related to your strategy. By conditions and assumptions, that's again going back to what you know about the system and the way that you believe it already works. These need to hold in order for your tactics to be effectual. If your assumptions are proved to be invalid or wrong, it's likely the tactics that you would have designed as part of your strategy are no longer fit for purpose. The 6th step is to try and write that theory of change out as a narrative or a visualization, or perhaps a mix of the two. Lastly, as your strategy unfolds and you begin to enact your actions and tactics on the ground, you need to constantly revisit that theory of change and update it with new information you get about the context, the stakeholders, and what's working and what's not. To really hammer home the point made in step 7, it's crucial that you as activists or as a bunch of organizations have the ability to and the humbleness to consistently revisit your assumptions about the context and evaluate your own actions for what's working or what's not. One of the ways to do this and work, especially in complex environments, is to constantly make small bets and test emerging ideas you have about particular tactics that you might want to use, evaluate them fast, and be really ready to omit those mistakes and course correct when you need to. Theories of change only really work if they're viewed as evolving documents and not as static. This means you have to have that ability to learn from your mistakes, to gather information from your allies, from the communities you're trying to help, from the wider system, and to course correct and revisit your assumptions as you do so. In a sense, a theory of change requires a lot of humbleness, a lot of nimbleness and flexibility, an ability to keep an open mind about what you're doing and what might help you to cause the changes, to drive the changes you seek.